I'm your host, Almer Coglano. Welcome to this episode of What the Ship, episode 51. Be at our 1 year anniversary next year. So, this episode, part of what's going on with shipping YouTube channel, we look at the top 5 maritime stories, pack them together, and try to put some context to the world of global shipping. If you're new to the channel, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new stories as they go out. Oh, story number one, we're going to look at some updates of some past stories and some status of some ships that we've been following. First ship we're going to look at in our update is the OS35. This is a bulker that was involved in a collision off the port of Gibraltar in the entrance exit between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. So this vessel was involved in a collision. It was holed up forward, and the vessel was intentionally beach grounded. As the vessel sank by the bow where the opening was done, the ship then proceeded to start breaking apart between the first and second cranes. Now, bad weather was coming into Gibraltar, and the salvage company, Resolve Marine, decided to go ahead and sink the entire vessel, basically allowed the vessel to fill with water and sit on the bottom. They did that for a variety of reasons, but most importantly, they did not want the vessel to break up. Even though they've pumped off the fuel oil from the vessel, there's still residual coming out of it. You can never get all of it off. But if the vessel began to tear apart, break apart into smaller pieces, it is much more difficult to salvage. So Resolve Marine made that decision to go ahead and sink the vessel in place, get through the foul weather, and now they're going to implement their salvage plan in an effort to try to raise the vessel in one piece by several pieces. Next story takes us to Iskenderun, Turkey, and the vessel Sea Eagle. So I posted this video the other day on how a ship capsized at berth, and the vessel involved here was the Sea Eagle. And we noted a couple of things that were strange about this vessel. Number one, the huge crowd on the pier, basically like waiting for something to happen. And then how this vessel almost immediately began to tip over. And at the very beginning of the video there, you saw a container handler moving that dark brown container off the vessel. And now here you see a container coming off the far side of the vessel, the port side, and this vessel begins to roll to port. And so there was a lot going on with this ship that we did not yet know. Well, we found new video of the vessel just prior to the rolling of the ship. So this is the new video we found. News Findy had this on. This is prior to the roll, and what you see here is Sea Eagle up against the berth, starboard side 2, but this time she's listing to starboard against the berth. And you'll notice some of the containers are on board that will be removed later. For example, you saw that brown container all the way up forward, this Lindy container back aft. And so she has a starboard list, which tells me that the vessel had stability problems coming into the berth. If a ship shifts a list from port and then hangs there and then starboard hangs there, that is a stability problem. Either the vessel was top heavy, in other words, those big 40-foot containers were too heavy for the vessel, or the vessel did not have enough ballast or fuel on board, low in the vessel, or a combination of both. And basically, we just don't know. But obviously, the vessel was in a poor stability situation coming into this. So that explains the crowd. A lot of those personnel were crew members who were told to get off the vessel. And so there was minimal crew on board when the vessel rolled. Our last story comes from the Maritime Safety Innovation Lab in Maryland. Now, you may remember the Maritime Safety Innovation Lab because they did a lot of the photos and videos I used when we were following the Ever Forward in its grounding back in March off the port of Baltimore. Now, this story was posted in early September, September 2nd, and they're talking about the Coast Guard and the National Transportation Safety Board not investigating the grounding of the Ever Forward. And I'm just going to read a part of this statement here because it's really interesting. It was reported after Ever Forward was refloated that the U.S. Coast Guard was conducting an investigation. Contact with the Public Affairs Office for their sector Maryland National Capital Region failed to verify this, and a request for information under the Freedom of Information Act has been submitted. Unofficial sources indicate that the National Transportation Safety Board is not conducting an investigation into the Ever Forward grounding, and a search of their docket reveals no such investigation, which means that both the Coast Guard and the NTSB is not investigating Ever Forward. Now, I have filed the Freedom of Information Act with both those agencies too to find out what is going on. Because understand, the grounding of Ever Forward could have been catastrophic for the Port of Baltimore. If that vessel had been hanging out across the channel, it could have shut the channel to Baltimore for days. This involved massive dredging. It involved the offload of a container ship, something we have not seen in the modern age. And I can't tell you at all, as long as container ships have gotten as big as they have been since 2006, no one I know has talked about the idea of offloading containers from a grounded vessel unless that vessel was lost. And yet Everforward was unique, and we did that. Over 500 containers had to come off. Dredging had to be done. And yet there doesn't appear to be investigation into this. Yet I keep hearing from people that the cause of this incident had to do with the pilot losing situational awareness. I don't know if that's true or not because I can't get confirmation from the pilots or anybody for that. But you know what? We're never going to know if the Coast Guard and NTSB doesn't do an investigation, which is their responsibility. If it is pilot situational awareness, if it's the crew, if it's mechanical, we need to know that so that we can prevent something like this from happening again. Because the people who had their cargo on that vessel suffered because of this. They either didn't get their cargo on time, they could have suffered monetary issues, cargoes could have been lost. I know one person was waiting for their furniture to show up. This is fairly significant for the people involved. And to hear that there's like nothing being done to understand why this happened, this just opens the door for a potential problem in the future. We had a grounding off Savannah with the Maersk Surabaya. That vessel basically had a blown circuit that basically the rudder angle indicator wasn't showing. There, is there a full investigation into that? We should know. If that's the case, then what are we doing to prevent that from happening? What's the issue here? Because again, it doesn't take much, as we learned from Ever Given in the Suez, to block major shipping ways. And the only way you prevent these things from happening is learning from past incidences. If you want to put your head in the sand and not worry about it, then great. But when it happens again, I'm going to be here to tell you, you should have paid heed and listened to this. All right, let's jump to story number 2. Story 2, we're going to run through the supply chain, particularly on the container side, and talk about the free fall of container rates and charter rates for container ships. This is a theme we're seeing in stories across the mediums, not just in the maritime journals, but also in mainstream media. Sam Chambers over Splash 24/7, hard landing forecast for container freight rates. Greg Miller over at FreightWaves, falling container spot rates much steeper, less orderly than expected. We are seeing these rates falling. And when you look at the rates, this is the latest chart by FreightWaves using the Freightos Baltic Index. One of the things you see here is freight rates do appear to be falling. Now, let me throw some caution here as you read these stories and you see this. You've got to look at the long-term big picture. You can't just look at the most recent rate drop. Because again, as I've used this analogy before, we're coming off Mount Everest. And just because you're halfway down Mount Everest doesn't mean you're not in danger anymore. Look at those rates back in July. You're talking about $10,000 from the Southeast Asia to the US East Coast. And it dropped down to 7,300 early in September. We see a slight uptick here, and I'll explain that in a second. But we're seeing the rates drop. But you need to remember that pre-COVID, these rates were dropped down low. I'm talking about $1,000 to $2,000 rates for the global index. We're talking about fairly cheap rates. We're still pretty high up there. And I think one of the reasons you're seeing an uptick again right now is the rates are beginning to stabilize. I think we're hitting bottom for this market right now. Going on here, you're hearing about charter ship rates for containers. Mike Schuller had this article over at G-Captain, container ship charter market coming back to earth. He has this chart here from Harpex talking about charter rates for vessels down a massive 17% from the previous week. Greg Miller has the same kind of piece here with that same chart. Well, I went to this chart. This is the Harpex chart that they're talking about. And you look at this and man, it's impressive. We've dropped quite a bit. And you look at where the minimum is right now for charter rates, you look at where the average is, that looks impressive. But when you go out a little further and you go out 2 years, look at where it's at right now. We're coming off that big high hump, but we're still up there quite a bit. So you really got to look at the long term where everything is. Go back here to October of 2020 when rates were really low to fix ships. And now you're seeing that the rates are coming down steeply. I mean, just really steeply right here. But again, they went up pretty steep too. So we really have to have context in what's happening with the market. The question is, does this begin to plateau off, and will it stay high? Will we be between that max and min with an average? We're about at that 24-month average right now. But we're seeing this play out in different ways too. Matson, for example, is suspending its premium Trans-Pacific service amid falling demand. Still going to be running their Trans-Pacific, but not their priority service. Matson's been really good because Matson's been able to get cargo from China to the West Coast of the United States expedited for a couple of reasons. Number one, they run smaller ships, so they can get into the smaller berths in Long Beach and bypass the big berths. Plus, they're U.S. flag, a lot of their ships, and they get to jump the head of the line when you come into L.A. and Long Beach. So Matson's premier service has been really good. And this is going to account for why we're seeing container rates fall for a company like Matson. And at the same time, we have the Federal Maritime Commission, who is looking at what's going on in the ports right now, and they're getting ready to declare an emergency situation. They put out this request for information, basically a feeling from everybody. This is a power that's given to them under the Ocean Shipping Reform Act. They've been wanting to fix their muscles, so to speak. And I was pretty sure they're going to do it. I think they're going to do it. It doesn't really give them emergency power over the ports. What it basically does is allow them to record and get data from shipping companies, from freight forwarders, from the ports themselves. And what FMC is trying to do is increase the visibility of data. And so why not do that? And I think they will, because it makes the most sense. All right, let's jump over to story number 3. I don't do impersonations too much, but I'll do it for you for this time. You get a car, you get a car, you get a car. Famous Oprah line. How could you not love that line? Well, you may not be getting that new car. And if you are getting that new car, it's going to be expensive. The freight rates for car carriers out on the ocean are at an all-time high. We talk a lot about containers. We talk about tankers, talk about LNG. We even talk about bulk carriers. But one of the sub areas of shipping is car carriers. And right now we're seeing record high for the chartering of car carriers. I'm talking about $80,000 a day for a car carrier, basically a floating parking lot. This story from Bloomberg really jumps into it, where earnings for freighters that move autos and industrial machines across the globe have surged to about $80,000 a day, the highest since recorded data back in 2000. And this is having an impact. You know, you tend to think that, well, the U.S. imports all these foreign-made cars, but we actually don't. If you look at car carriers and the way they operate, most car carriers come into the United States loaded with cars, but they leave loaded with cars. They're swapping out decks loads of cars. Now, it's not always the same amount. It's not one for one. But they load a lot of cars because car manufacturers build different styles of cars in different countries. So that even if you're Hyundai and you think they're in Korea, they're not, because they have manufacturing plants in the US. But they manufacture different styles of cars. And so those cars have to be shipped out to different places. And what we're seeing right now is a big problem. This story goes on, but a stagnating vessel fleet alongside a steady recovery in demand since the nadir of COVID has now spurred record rates for ships that carry as many as 6,500 cars across the globe. Over a 60-day voyage, that would imply about $740 per car, up about fivefold since the pandemic began. I can tell you for a fact, I have a friend who's a captain on a car carrier. She sails for an American line. She's done nine circumnavigations of the planet. You know, she starts on the East Coast of the United States and, you know, heads east. And she's in Europe. She's through the Mediterranean, through Suez, through the Indian Ocean, through the Straits of Malacca, to Asia, and then across the Pacific, through the Panama, and does it all over again. And this creates a demand system where she's picking up cars all the time and rotating them around and bringing them in. But right now it is at a premium. Why? Because car manufacturing was down, chips and all the associated elements with it. Demand is up. Used cars, try to buy a used car now, and the price they're at is insane. If you're going to pay that much for a used car, I might as well buy a new car. And so the demand is up, which means car carriers are getting prime money right now, and that's being transferred to the car that you're looking to buy at your local dealership. I should also note that the U.S. military, in their infinite wisdom, has decided this is the moment to go onto the market and begin to buy car carriers for replacing in the surge sea lift fleet. Leave it to the military to pick the worst time possible to restock the sea lift fleet. let's go buy car carriers. A few years ago, you can get them for a dime a dozen. Back in early 2020, I could have sold you car carriers for a deal. But no, let's wait till 2022 when the market has car carriers at the highest amount, so that when they buy car carriers, what they're buying is the runts of the litter, the oldest, most beat vessels they can get for premium dollars. USA. That's the way we do things in the US government when it comes to restocking our sea lift fleet. God. All right, let's go to story number 4. All right, it's time for me to do my Wolf of Wall Street impersonation, and we're going to talk about shipping stocks. This story by Greg Miller early this month was a great one. Haven't had a chance to talk about it. I really want to talk about it. Cruel summer for container dry bulk stocks as sun shines on tankers. So Greg, I love Greg. He goes into these kind of very visceral, right down to the data on shipping stocks, and he really breaks it down across these 3 sectors. So let's take a look at this. So in the container market here, let me go ahead and get my mug out of your face so you can see a little better. Here you go. So here's the container shipping stocks. And one of the things you'll see right here is this starts from January all the way up to the present day, taking the cost of the stocks on January 1st as your baseline, set 0. And you'll see shipping stocks had peaked back in late March, early April, and then kind of lowered back down and then hit the bottom in July, peaked back up for a little bit in August, and now back down again. And you can see that Zim is the lowest right there. And Zim, I have to tell you, is always the weird container stock for me, because I think it acts as a bellwether for all container shipping. Zim is the only of the top 10 companies you can really get on the New York Stock Exchange. Some of these shipping companies don't even sell stock at all. And so a lot of people invest in Zim. When Zim had their IPO at the beginning of 2021, it was massive. You've seen the growth of this stock. It's been tremendous. However, now you're really seeing the containers starting to come down. And so it's not surprising to see that. Matson, also there, you see Matson coming down. They're off record profits. Again, they're cutting that premium Trans-Pacific line. They're still going to be making money. They're still going to be good, solid earners, but they're not going to be as high as they were. What's interesting here is GSL and Davos here, because those are not container ship company operate. They're not container ship lines. They lease container ships to container ship lines. And their contracts are locked in. They've got set contracts going through 2024, 2025, some cases 2026. And so they're in a pretty good shape. It's just, I don't think a lot of people can differentiate between what those container leasing companies do versus container companies, container shipping lines do. And so they get thrown in here when in truth, they've got solid economics if you look at them. Over on the dry bulk side, very similar. Look what happened back in February when all of a sudden Russia invades Ukraine. Dry bulk stocks go through the roof, peak in June, and then all of a sudden begin to fall. And I think that that's a bit of a misnomer right there. I think because everyone realized, well, maybe the situation isn't as bad as we thought with Russia, Ukraine. There's the illusion that the Russia-Ukraine grain deal is working, and I'll talk about that in my last story for today. But you see right now the bulk stocks are down. They're down below than where they were at the beginning of the year. However, one of the things you can start expecting is to see the bulk stocks probably start coming up, particularly in the shipment of coal coming into the winter months, food. These are issues that people need to start stockpiling on, especially with the situation with Europe and its need to import LNG. China right now is making up with their LNG shortfall by using coal, but you're going to see big bulk vessels being loaded with coal, loaded with grain and ore, upticking again. It's just right now, they're kind of a precursor for the container market. In many ways, the bulk feeds into the containers, the raw materials, the energy needed to make the manufactured goods. They're kind of leading you to where the containers are. As you're seeing containers fall now, you already saw the bulk come down, but I kind of envision them going back up again. Finally, tankers. Man, tankers are the one market that is really kind of booming. Go back to January 1st and you look at companies like Scorpio, and all the others listed here, they are just kind of banging along here. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that companies are shipping oil longer distances now, with Russia being off the market, so to speak, although they're really not. But definitely the uptick in energy, LNG, clean products, gas and diesel, and even the crude products are we're seeing peaks in here. And tankers have been talking about going up higher here, and we're definitely seeing that right now. And if you go out even further beyond the years here, tankers have been low for years now. And really the only place they have to go is up. So I think it's a really interesting take that Greg's article does. I'll of course have the link in the show notes and you can take a look at it. And again, don't take your stock advice from me. I am a former merchant mariner, a maritime historian, and I am not living the lap of luxury as the background here indicates. If I was, this would be a beach and I wouldn't have to do these videos at all. So really don't think you should take your stock advice from me. All right, let's go ahead and jump to our last story. All right, our last video takes us to Russia, Ukraine. I'm doing a separate video on this because I think it's really important to talk about this. I'm going to talk about the one's going to be on the Russia Ukraine grain deal because I think there's a lot more going on here than probably this little segment's going to be able to do it justice. And then also on the G7 proposal to cap Russian oil, which I think is going to fail miserably. I was just on Freight Waves this morning with Greg Miller talking about this. So this story right here from Reuters: Putin to Europe, if you want gas, then open up Nord Stream 2. Going into the winter, the situation for power fuel in Europe is going to be critical. It really is. And the question is going to be, will Europe be able to get enough liquefied natural gas from the United States? LNG rates are $100,000 per day per ship. And the only reason that LNG is flowing to Europe and the amount it is because Asia is on a downward tick right now in fuel consumption. If that changes and you start getting into a bidding war where the LNG is going to go, there's going to be a huge problem. Not to mention the fact that LNG is really expensive in Europe because what they were getting through Nord Stream 1 and through the pipeline that crosses Ukraine and Belarus into Europe is natural gas, not liquefied natural gas. Liquefied natural gas is how you transport natural gas on vessels. You cool it to 260 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. And then when you bring it to Europe, you got to regas it. You have to warm it up, and you don't just warm it up. There's a process to go through. And that means bringing in these big regassing vessels, which means cost. And it's really friggin' expensive. It's cheaper to send it through the pipeline. And so Europe's going to be in a real quandary here. There's the morality issue. We defend Ukraine, but then there's the realistic issue. We're freezing to death. We need gas. And it's going to be a real question about what way Europe goes. This is, of course, impacting the oil market tremendously as Russia is flooding the market with oil. I looked at the price per barrel based on Brent oil, WTI oil. It's running about $85, $90 a barrel. Ural oil or Ural oil, which is the Russian oil, is about mid 60s. So Russia is basically slashing prices, flooding the market with cheap oil, getting contracts so that they can make people more dependent on their oil. In the meantime, you're hearing these great stories. Hey, 167 ships have left Ukraine ports since the grain deal. You see this: UN ships leave Ukraine for wheat with Ethiopia. This is fantastic. We're getting that Ukrainian wheat out. Oh, thank God this has happened. This is, everything is great. Is it? Can we just take one quick look at this for a second? This is the UN report, the Black Sea Grain Initiative, the Joint Coordination Center. I showed this to you in a separate video explaining this and their input. And we'll look at the most recent fact sheet for 12 September. Here it is. As of noon on 12 September, 2.7 metric tons of grain and other foodstuffs have been moved from 3 Ukrainian ports. Wow, 2.7 million metric tons. That sounds like a lot of grain, Sal. It is. It is a lot of grain until you realize that Ukraine was shipping monthly 5 to 6 million tons. And that's how much they've shipped in about 2 months. So they're shipping a fraction of that. Well, hang on, Sal. Okay, they're not getting a lot of grain out, but at least they're getting it into the hands of the people who need it. Are they? Next line, 28% to low and low middle income countries. Egypt, 10%. Iran, India, 5%. Sudan and Kenya, 2%. And the countries that need it the most, Djibouti, Lebanon, Somalia, and Yemen, 1%. They're getting the least amount of grains. Why is the UN putting grain ships together? Because no one's shipping the grain to these countries because they're being outbid by the 27% upper to middle income countries. Turkey's doing it. Why? Because Turkey makes the most flour in the world and they need the wheat coming in to make the flour. China does it because China always needs food. And 44% to high-income countries: Spain, Netherlands, Italy, Korea, Romania, Germany, France, Greece, Ireland, and Israel. They're being outbid. And the worst part here is you're not going to get a lot out of Ukraine because you're using old, slow, open registry ships that are expendable, and you can get war risk for them under the $50 million cap. So that when you look at marine traffic and you see the flow of goods coming out of the Sea of Azov, out of Novorossiysk, the Russian ships are flowing like crazy out of the Black Sea. Meanwhile, look up here at the Gulf of Odessa. Well, here comes a group, not a convoy. Don't use the term convoy. UN doesn't want you to use convoy. Convoy means military escorts. These are not convoys. But when you look at the vessels coming out of here, they are not big. They are not large vessels coming out. They are, basically small to medium-sized vessels coming out, really not pulling a lot of cargo and grain out of this area. So you're getting a trickle out of Ukraine. Meanwhile, the spigots are wide open with Russia. And, oh, by the way, we still have that lingering issue of mines. A Romanian Navy vessel found a drifting mine in its waters and went to go deactivate it. And well, they deactivated it by blowing it up alongside their vessel. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, but the Romanian ship hit the mine. And again, this is that issue of loose mines in the water. You literally have a Romanian ship hit a mine. And we don't know if it was a Russian mine, Ukrainian mine. It really doesn't matter whose mine it is. All that matters is it's floating and it blows up. And it's only a matter of time till this runs astray of a vessel trying to get out. And again, if only there was an organization out there somewhere, perhaps close by, who could do and send in minesweepers, like this story by the U.S. Navy. NATO exercise Dynamic Mariner underway in the Mediterranean. This is a minesweeping exercise that's taking place right now. 12 allied nations off the coast of, wait for it, Turkey, are conducting a minesweeping operation. And Mine Countermeasure Group 2 is there. Here's an idea. U.S. Navy, NATO Navy, if you really want to practice sweeping mines, I've got a spot for you. You can head just a little bit north of where you are, cut through the Turkish Straits, and go sweep all the mines you want and provide a real service by preventing these floating mines from hitting potential vessels in the Black Sea. Purely defensive. They're minesweepers. It's not going to anger Russia. It won't anger Ukraine. It helps the Romanians. It helps the Bulgarians. It helps the Turks, who are NATO allies. And you can alleviate some of the concern of these floating mines that are out there, unless we don't care. And then we'll just wait for the next ship to hit a mine and see what happens, which is usually what tends to happen. Sorry, I get a little bit angst about this. The fact that we don't care about the merchant mariners who are, sailing in and out of a war zone here with very little protection at all. A lot going on. Hope you enjoy those updates. A lot going on. We'll be keep watching those vessels. Again, the container market, the car carrier market, the tanker market, Russia, Ukraine, all are playing right now in the situation that you're seeing in the stores, online shopping, at the gas pump, buying a car. This is how global shipping impacts your daily life. And I hope I provide a little bit of context for you so you understand that situation. If you enjoyed the video, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, give it a thumbs up, share it across social media. Hey, share it across social media. We've been banging great across social media, I have to say. Past month or so, it's been a phenomenal month for what's going on with shipping. We've really increased our number of subscribers, our views, and I appreciate everybody who contributes to that by subscribing, by sharing and sending it out. Just, send it out with your friends, do it across the different social medias. It really matters a lot, especially when you like the videos. It gets it out there so other people will find it. And then if you really want to support the channel, there's two ways you can do it. One, you get the super thanks button below, contribute whatever you find, whatever you can. It's great. It gives to the channel, or you become a member of Patreon and become a patron of the channel. The link will come up at the end of the video. It's in the show notes. You can do it monthly or yearly, however you want to contribute to it. I appreciate it. It allows me to have the time to put these stories together, pack them together for you, and give you features throughout the week. Until our next video, This is Sal signing off.